The Beast Unleashed. The monster's acid-dripping fangs ripped through buildings as it rampaged unchecked, the galaxy's deadliest creature savaging the Pandian capital until one human dared to stand against it. Terry Young, a battle-hardened ex-soldier turned gun for hire, gazed at the distress call flickering on his ship's display. The secret military bioweapon, bred from the most lethal predators, had broken loose on Zephyria Prime, the capital of the conniving Pandian Empire. This abomination, ominously named the Dread Reaper, was tearing a swath of gruesome destruction that would soon doom the planet. Terry's eyes narrowed as he read the desperate plea. Stop the unstoppable beast, prevent catastrophe. Your price paid in full. Terry snorted derisively. Pandians hiring a human after scheming to subjugate Earth for decades. They must be truly desperate. He almost deleted the message. Let the bastards get a taste of their own poison. But something about this monster gave him pause. A challenge, perhaps the ultimate test of his skills. Terry had faced armies, but never a demonic amalgamation of killing instinct quite like this. If left unchecked, this Dread Reaper could threaten far more than one world. It could shift the tenuous balance, giving the treacherous Pandians a devastating advantage in their galactic power plays. Worse, if it escaped, it might find its way to human colonies, to Earth itself. Terry's jaw clenched as he absorbed the high stakes. Sighing heavily, he keyed in the coordinates for Zephyria Prime. Looks like this old dog was going hunting again, to slay a demon spawned from science gone mad, to remind the galaxy why you never bet against humanity when the chips are down. The Valkyrie leaped to warp, carrying one man to face the creature feared by all. The monster's rampage was about to meet its match. Arrival at Ground Zero. Terry's jaw tightened as the Valkyrie plummeted toward Zephyria Prime's surface. Flames lapped at the viewport. This damned re-entry. The heat was incredible. But Terry had been through worse. As he broke through the cloud cover, the true scale of the devastation came into focus. The once gleaming capital city was a smoking ruin, the skyline shattered by the Dread Reaper's rampage. The Valkyrie touched down on the outskirts, amid a makeshift forward operating base bustling with activity. Soldiers scrambled between tents, shouting orders over the thrum of engines. Terry popped the hatch and hopped out, rifle slung over his shoulder. He was immediately confronted by a tall Pandian in a commander's uniform. The alien had slate-gray skin and cold, calculating eyes that sized Terry up like a slab of meat. "So you're the human," the commander growled. "I am Commander Urlaton. Get one thing straight. Human, the only reason you're here is because we're out of options." Terry met Ur's glare. "Seems to me like you boys already had your shot," he said evenly. "How'd that work out?" Ur's nostrils flared, but he didn't rise to the bait. "We've lost good soldiers to that thing. What makes you think you'll do any better?" Terry shouldered past him, moving towards the holographic command table. "Because it's what I do." He studied the flickering display, which showed a real-time map of the city. A pulsing red dot indicated the creature's position. It was rampaging through the central district, moving with purposeful direction. "It's headed for the central power plant," Terry mused aloud. He tapped the building on the map, expanding the schematic. The facility housed an experimental reactor, an energy source the Pandians had been working to weaponize. "That thing's drawn to the biggest power source around, probably looking to fuel up." Terry turned to face the commander. "I know how to stop it. We lure it out of the city using a portable version of that reactor as bait, lead it somewhere remote, and take it out without risking more collateral damage." Ur snorted. "You want to give a walking apocalypse exactly what it wants. How do you know it won't just absorb the energy and become unstoppable?" Terry's face was grim. "We don't. But if we don't try something, you can kiss your capital goodbye." He fixed Ur with a hard stare. "You brought me here to do a job. This is how I do it. The real question is, are you going to help me or stay out of my way?" Ur ground his teeth but finally relented. "I'll have my engineers prep a portable reactor. But let's be clear, human, if this goes sideways, It's on you. Fine by me. Terry turned back to the map, his mind racing. Something about this felt off. The Dread Reaper was deadly, no doubt, but it was still an animal, acting on instinct. So why did it seem to have a plan? There was more going on here. He could feel it in his bones, but there was no time to ponder. The stakes were too high. Terry steeled himself for the battle to come. One way or another, he would end this. And if there was more to the Reaper than met the eye, he'd deal with that when the time came. For now, he had a job to do, a galaxy to save, and a monster to slay. The ambush. Terry's boots crunched over rubble as he ventured into the ravaged streets of the capital, the portable reactor strapped to his back. The weight of the device was nothing compared to the burden of the mission ahead. Yer and a small squad of Pandian soldiers flanked him, weapons at the ready. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant echoes of the creature's rampage. As they turned a corner, Terry raised a fist, signaling a halt. Ahead, huddled in the shadow of a collapsed storefront, was a group of survivors, men, women, and children, their faces streaked with grime and blood. One child, a girl no older than 6, cradled a broken arm, whimpering softly. Terry's eyes met Yer's. We have to help them. Yer's jaw tightened. We don't have time for this. But Terry was already moving, kneeling beside the girl. Hey there, he said softly. Let me take a look at that. With gentle hands, he examined the injury, then began to fashion a splint from debris. As he worked, Terry directed the other soldiers to distribute what supplies they could spare: food, water, emergency blankets. Yer watched, torn between impatience and a grudging respect. Within minutes, they were moving again, leaving the survivors with a promise of more aid to come. Terry could feel Yer's gaze on him, appraising. He met it evenly. No one gets left behind, he said simply. Yer grunted, but there was a glimmer of something like approval in his eyes. They were nearing the outskirts now, the buildings giving way to rocky terrain. Terry consulted his map, then pointed to a narrow canyon ahead. There, he said, that's where we'll set the trap. But as they approached the canyon's mouth, a hail of energy bolts suddenly split the air. Terry dove for cover, Yer beside him. Ambush. Yer snarled. From the rocks above, a group of heavily armed Pandians emerged. But they weren't wearing military uniforms. Rebels, Terry realized, taking advantage of the chaos to stage their own uprising. So, the Pandian military, the rebel leader spat. That makes you our enemy. Terry shook his head. Not today. It doesn't. That creature back there, it doesn't care what side you're on. It'll kill us all just the same. He locked eyes with the leader. Help stop it. Then you can get back to your revolution. The rebel leader hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. What do you need? Minutes later, they were moving again, the rebels now part of their unlikely alliance. As they rigged the portable reactor in the center of the canyon, the rebel leader pulled Terry aside. The creature's been moving in a pattern, he said, hitting the city's energy sources one by one, always at night. He handed Terry a data chip. Surveillance footage. Might help you predict its next move. Terry nodded his thanks. Get your people clear, he said. Things are about to get hot. As the rebels melted back into the rocks, Terry and Yer took position, waiting. Intense silence. The reactor hummed, a pulsing beacon in the gathering dark. You think this will work? Yer asked quietly. A distant roar split the night, growing louder with each passing second. The ground began to tremble. Terry's heart pounded. Get ready, he breathed. And then it was there, rounding the bend in a thunderous charge. The Dread Reaper, a nightmare made flesh. Terry had never seen anything like it. A twisted fusion of biological and mechanical parts, all teeth and claws, and raw primal hunger. It fixed its burning gaze on the reactor and let out a triumphant bellow. Terry's finger tightened on the trigger. Come on, you bastard, he whispered. Just a little closer. But as the creature neared the trap, something unexpected happened. The spines along its back began to glow, pulsing with an eerie blue light. Suddenly, a shimmering force field crackled into existence around it, a translucent bubble of energy. Terry's eyes widened. What the hell? The Dread Reaper charged straight through the trap, the force field absorbing the blast. Terry and Ur barely had time to dive clear as it thundered past, snatching up the reactor in its jaws. With a crunch of metal, it crushed the device, the energy coursing into its body. The force field pulsed brighter, growing in strength. Terry staggered to his feet, staring in disbelief. The creature turned, fixing him with a look of pure malevolence. In that moment, Terry knew two things with absolute clarity. 1. The Dread Reaper was far more than a mindless beast. There was a cruel intelligence behind those eyes, a malevolent purpose. And 2, they were in deep trouble. The canyon collapse. As the Dread Reaper charged into the canyon, Terry's fingers stabbed down on the detonator. The portable reactor exploded in a blinding flash, the shock wave slamming into the creature like a hammer blow. For a heartbeat, the monster staggered, its force field flickering. Hope surged through Terry's veins. But then, to his horror, the Reaper's spines pulsed brighter, absorbing the energy in a crackling surge. The creature swelled, muscles bulging grotesquely as it fed on the power. Terry scrambled back as the Reaper rounded on him, twice its original size, eyes blazing with malevolent intelligence. His plan had just supercharged the very thing he'd meant to destroy. Ur was at his side in an instant, dragging him to cover behind a boulder. Now what? The commander growled. Terry's mind raced. The canyon walls towered around them, ancient stone worn by wind and time. An idea sparked. We use the terrain, he said quickly. Drive it deeper in, bring the whole damn canyon down on its head. Ur barked orders into his comm, and his soldiers sprang into action. Explosives were hastily rigged along the canyon rim as Terry and Ur played a deadly game of cat and mouse, luring the Reaper further in with taunting blasts from their weapons. The creature snarled, the sound shaking the earth as it gave chase. Rubble crunched beneath its claws, its bulk scraping the canyon walls. Terry and Weir wove between the rocks, always staying just one step ahead. As they ran, dodging the Reaper's slashing talons, something shifted between the two warriors. The mistrust and resentment began to fall away, replaced by a grudging respect. Terry saw the fierce determination in Ur's eyes, the refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds. Not so different from himself. Ur, in turn, marveled at the human's quick thinking, his ability to adapt on the fly. Terry was no simple brute, but a cunning strategist. In that moment, the lines between human and Pandian blurred. They were just two soldiers, united against a common foe. At last, they had the Reaper where they wanted it, hemmed in by sheer rock. Terry and Ur scrambled up the canyon wall. The detonator clutched tight in Terry's fist. Now, he roared. For a long moment, silence reigned. Terry and Ur stood atop the rubble, chests heaving, hardly daring to believe it was over. Then the ground heaved beneath their feet, rocks shifted, then exploded outward as the Dread Reaper burst free with a deafening roar. But something had changed. The creature's flesh rippled, shimmering with an unearthly light. As it opened its jaws, the air itself seemed to warp. A sonic blast erupted from the Reaper's maw, a wall of pure force that slammed into Terry and Ur like a physical blow. They were hurled backward, smashing into the canyon wall with bone-jarring impact. Through ringing ears and blurred vision, Terry saw the Reaper clawed its way free of the rubble, its body pulsing with stolen energy. With a triumphant bellow, it turned and surged back the way it had come, smashing through the rockfalls like they were made of paper. Terry struggled to his feet, his whole body screaming in protest. Ur lay nearby, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "We have to stop it," the commander rasped. But Terry could only watch in numb horror as the Dread Reaper thundered out of the canyon and back toward the city, a juggernaut of destruction. It had played them, let them think they had it cornered, only to unleash a new horror. Now it was loose again, more powerful than ever. And this time, Terry had no idea how to stop it. The final stand. Terry's boots pounded the rubble-strewn streets as he and Yer raced back towards the heart of the besieged city. The Dread Reaper's triumphant roar echoed off shattered buildings, spurring them on with renewed urgency. They had to stop this thing, and fast, or there wouldn't be a city left to save. As they neared the central district, the scale of the destruction took Terry's breath away. Skyscrapers that had once pierced the clouds now lay toppled like a child's discarded toys. Fires raged unchecked, painting the sky an angry red. And at the center of it all, towering over the ruins like a colossus, was the Dread Reaper. Pandian fighter craft swarmed around the monstrosity, their weapons unleashing a blistering barrage. Laser beams and missiles streaked through the air, pounding the creature's hide. But for all their firepower, they might as well have been throwing pebbles. The Reaper's force field shimmered, absorbing the onslaught without so much as a flicker. "We need a new plan," Yer growled, his eyes never leaving the rampaging beast. Terry's mind raced, the gears turning as he scanned the cityscape. His gaze settled on the massive power plant at the city's edge, its reactor towers glowing with barely contained energy. A desperate idea began to form. "The power grid," he said quickly. "If we can channel all that energy into a concentrated burst, it might be enough to overload the Reaper's systems, short it out from the inside." Yer stared at him, then shook his head. "You realize that'll knock out power to the entire city. Everything we've got left. You got a better idea." Terry shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, a blackout is a hell of a lot better than oblivion." Yer hesitated, then nodded grimly. "I'll get my engineers on it, but we'll need to buy them time." As if on cue, a piercing shriek split the air. Terry spun, his rifle snapping up to see a horde of smaller creatures pouring out of the rubble. They swarmed towards them like a living tide, all claws and teeth and raw primal hunger. Offspring, spawned from the eggs the Reaper had laid during its rampage. "Go!" Terry roared, already firing into the mass of bodies. "Get that EMP up and running. I'll hold them off." Yer hesitated a split second, then turned and sprinted towards the power plant, barking orders into his comm. Terry stood his ground, the pulse rifle bucking in his grip as he mowed down the advancing horde. They came at him in a frenzy, leaping and slashing, but Terry was a whirlwind of death, his movements fluid and precise. Minutes that felt like hours ticked by, the street growing slick with gore. Terry's arms burned with fatigue, his lungs heaved for air, but still he fought, because he knew that every second he bought was a second closer to ending this nightmare. And then, just as he thought he could fight no more, Yer's voice crackled over the comm. "It's ready. Get clear." Terry didn't need to be told twice. With a final burst of fire, he turned and sprinted, leaping over the twitching bodies of the fallen. Behind him, the Dread Reaper roared, its attention drawn by the sudden movement. It turned its massive form, casting a shadow over the streets, and charged. Terry ran, his legs pumping, his heart pounding. He could feel the creature's breath on his back, could hear the thunder of its approach. But he didn't dare look back. He had to reach the perimeter, had to give Yer a clear shot. At the last possible second, he hurled himself forward, rolling clear just as Yer activated the EMP. There was a blinding flash, a crackling surge of energy that made Terry's hair stand on end. The pulse washed over the city, over the Dread Reaper. The creature convulsed, its force field flickering and dying as its systems overloaded. It staggered, a roar of pain and rage tearing from its throat. But even as it reeled, Terry knew their fight was far from over. The EMP had weakened the beast, but it was far from defeated. As it shook off the effects, its eyes blazing with malevolent fury, Terry readied his rifle once more. The ultimate sacrifice. Time seemed to slow as Terry's finger tightened on the trigger, the crosshairs of his pulse rifle centered on the Dread Reaper's exposed core. The creature bucked and writhed beneath him, its hide slick with ichor. But Terry held fast, his legs locked around its spine. "Come on, you bastard," he growled through gritted teeth. "Just hold still." Suddenly, his comm crackled to life. "Terry, it's Zora. Listen to me very carefully." The scientist's voice was tight with urgency. "The core, it's not just a weakness. It's a fail-safe. If you destroy it, the Reaper will self-destruct. You'll have seconds, maybe less, to get clear." Terry's blood ran cold. He glanced down at Ur, still struggling to regain his footing amidst the rubble. If he took the shot, if he ended this here and now, his comrade would never make it out of the blast radius in time. But if he didn't, the Dread Reaper would keep coming. It would level the city, slaughter thousands, and then it would move on to the next world, and the next, an unstoppable wave of destruction. In that crystallized moment, hanging between life and death, Terry made his choice. "Ur," he roared over the din of battle. "Run. Get out of here now." Ur's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he took in Terry's precarious position. Understanding flashed across his face, followed by a grim resolve. He nodded once, sharply, then turned and sprinted for cover. Terry watched him go, a strange sense of peace settling over him. This was it. This was what he'd been born for. Not to flee, but to fight, to stand even when all hope seemed lost. He turned back to the Dread Reaper, his rifle steady in his hands. "All right, you son of a bitch," he murmured. "Let's dance." He pulled the trigger. The pulse bolt leaped from the barrel, searing across the short distance to bury itself deep in the creature's core. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the core began to glow, a searing, blinding light that built and built until Terry had to look away, shielding his eyes. The Dread Reaper convulsed, a deep, resonant hum building in its chest. Terry could feel the vibrations in his bones, could taste the charge in the air. He knew he had seconds, maybe less, before the fail-safe triggered and the creature detonated. But he couldn't move. His legs wouldn't respond, his muscles locked tight. Whether it was fear, adrenaline, or some strange acceptance of his fate, he didn't know. As the light from the core reached a blinding crescendo, as the hum built to a deafening roar, Terry closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, of the green hills and blue skies of home. He thought of the lives he'd saved, and the ones he hadn't. He thought of Ur, of the bond they'd forged in the heat of battle. And he smiled, because he knew, in that final, infinite moment, that it had all been worth it. Every scar, every sacrifice, every bit of pain and broken bone. He'd made a difference. He'd mattered. And in the end, wasn't that all any soldier could ask for?